The letter sat on Rowan Blackridge's desk like a death sentence. I will not die here pretending I am loved. For the first time in 10 years, the Duke of Thornmar, a man who'd survived border wars, political betrayals, and a childhood that would have broken lesser men, felt something crack inside his chest. Not anger, not pride, fear. His wife was gone. The woman he'd ignored for 8 months had walked out into a snowstorm rather than spend one more day in his house, and he had no idea how to fix what he'd destroyed. If you want to see whether an alpha who forgot how to feel can learn to love before it's too late, stay until the end. Drop a like, and tell us what city you're watching from in the comments. The manor stood like a monument to everything Rowan Blackridge had built and everything he'd lost the ability to feel. Thornmar Hall wasn't beautiful, it was functional. Gray stone, sharp angles, windows that let in light but no warmth. The kind of place that made sense for a man who'd spent his youth fighting in border skirmishes and his adulthood managing a duchy that stretched across some of the harshest land in the realm. Every room had a purpose. Every servant had a task. Every day ran like clockwork, and Rowan preferred it that way. He stood in his study now, reviewing grain reports as winter pressed against the windows. Outside, the first snow of the season was starting to fall, early this year, which meant the mountain passes would close within weeks. He made a mental note to send word to the southern estates about adjusted supply routes. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he said, not looking up. His steward, Marcus, stepped inside. "Your Grace, the carriage has arrived." Rowan's pen paused. "For just a second." "Right. The wife." He'd almost forgotten. "See that she's settled in the East Wing," he said, returning to his ledger. "Make sure she has everything she needs." Marcus hesitated. "Will you not greet her yourself, Your Grace?" "I'm occupied." "It's her first day in her new home." Rowan's jaw tightened. He set down his pen with deliberate care. "Marcus, I married the girl because her father needed an alliance, and I needed heirs. I've provided her with a home, security, and a title most women would kill for. That's the extent of my obligations. Now see to her arrangements." Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe. The old steward had been with Rowan since he was a boy. He was one of the few people in the world who remembered when Rowan had been different. Before the war, before his father's madness, before he'd learned that caring about anything made you weak. "As you wish, Your Grace." The door closed quietly. Rowan went back to his reports, refusing to acknowledge the small knot of something, not quite guilt, not quite curiosity, that had formed in his chest. Lillian Vance had known what she was getting into. At least, she'd thought she did. Her father had been clear. The marriage was political. The Duke of Thornmar needed a wife, preferably one from a respectable family with no scandals and reasonable childbearing prospects. In return, House Vance would gain protection and resources for their struggling eastern holdings. "You'll be a duchess," her mother had said, helping her pack. "You'll want for nothing." What they hadn't mentioned was that she'd be marrying a man who'd spoken fewer than 20 words to her during their entire courtship, who'd looked at her during the wedding ceremony like she was a document he was signing, who hadn't touched her, not even to hold her hand during the entire journey to Thornmar Hall. The carriage ride had taken 3 days. Rowan had ridden alongside on horseback, stopping only when necessary, speaking only to give orders to his men. He hadn't eaten meals with her, hadn't asked if she was comfortable, hadn't even looked at her directly. And now, standing in the grand entrance hall of what was supposed to be her new home, watching a gray-haired steward apologize that his grace was occupied with urgent business, Lillian felt the first real tendril of fear wrap around her heart. The hall was massive. Cold. The kind of space that swallowed sound and gave nothing back. "If you'll follow me, my lady," Marcus said gently, "I'll show you to your chambers." Your chambers, not their chambers. She followed him up a wide staircase, her travel cloak still damp from the snow. "The East Wing," he'd said. She'd been placed in the East Wing, as far from the Duke's quarters as physically possible. The rooms were fine. More than fine. A sitting room with a fireplace, a bedroom with a canopy bed, a dressing area with windows overlooking the grounds. Everything was clean, well-maintained, perfectly arranged, and utterly lifeless. "I'll have the staff bring up your trunks," Marcus said. Dinner is served at 7. His Grace prefers punctuality. Will he? Lillian's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. She cleared her throat. Will he be joining me? Marcus's expression softened with something that looked like pity. His Grace takes most of his meals in his study, my lady, but you'll be well cared for. If you need anything, anything at all, you need only ask. He left her there, standing in the middle of a room that was supposed to be hers, but felt like a very expensive cage. Lillian walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling harder now, covering the grounds in white. In the distance, she could see the edge of the forest that bordered the estate, dark pines that stretched toward mountains she couldn't see through the storm. She'd left her family home that morning full of cautious hope. Maybe the Duke was just reserved. Maybe once they had time alone, away from the formality of the wedding, he'd warm up. Maybe this could become something real. Standing here now, looking out at a landscape as cold as her husband's eyes, Lillian felt that hope begin to crack. But she wasn't a quitter. Her mother had raised her to be practical, adaptable, strong, so this wasn't a love match. Fine. Plenty of marriages weren't. They could still build something, respect, partnership, maybe even friendship, given time. She just had to be patient. She just had to try. Ichab. Dinner that first night set the tone for everything that followed. Lillian dressed carefully, not her finest gown that would seem like she was trying too hard, but something pretty enough to show she'd made an effort. She had her maid, a quiet girl named Anne who'd been assigned to her, help with her hair. You look lovely, my lady, Anne said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. At least someone in this house seemed human. The dining room was on the ground floor, a long space with a table that could have seated 30. Tonight, there were 2 place settings, one at the head, one to the right. Rowan was already seated when she arrived. He didn't stand. You're punctual, he said, cutting into what looked like venison. Good. Lillian slid into her chair, her heart beating too fast. I didn't want to be late. He nodded once, didn't look at her. A servant appeared and began filling her plate. The food smelled delicious. Roasted meat, winter vegetables, fresh bread. Her stomach was too knotted to feel hungry. The journey wasn't too difficult, I hope, she tried. It was fine. The snow came earlier than expected. It usually does in the north. Silence fell like a stone. Lillian picked up her fork, took a bite. The food tasted like ash. She forced herself to swallow, to try again. The manor is beautiful, she said. Much larger than I expected. It needs to be. The household staff alone numbers over 40. That's quite... If you require anything, speak to Marcus. He manages the household. Another wall. Another door closed. Lillian set down her fork. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she hated it. Hated that he could make her feel small without even trying. Rowan, she said, using his name for the first time since the wedding. I know this marriage was arranged. I know you didn't choose me any more than I chose you. But we're here now. Couldn't we at least try to... Try to what? He finally looked at her, and his eyes were the color of winter steel. Pretend this is something it isn't? I don't have time for pretense, Lillian. I have a duchy to run, responsibilities that don't pause for sentiment. You have a role here. You'll oversee the household, represent the family at necessary functions, and in time, provide heirs. Beyond that, I don't see what requires trying. The words hit like slaps. I see, Lillian said quietly. Good. He went back to his meal. I'll be traveling to the northern border next week. There's been some trouble with raiders. I'll likely be gone a month, possibly longer. A month. He'd been her husband for less than a week, and he was already planning to leave for a month. Will you... She swallowed. Will you at least tell me about it? About what you're facing? Why? Because I'm your wife. Because I'd like to know what concerns you. Rowan set down his knife with a sound that made her flinch. Listen carefully. My concerns are mine. Your concerns are the household. That's the arrangement. If you're looking for a husband who will share his day over dinner and hold your hand by the fire, you married the wrong man. He stood abruptly. I have work to finish. Enjoy your meal. And he left her there, sitting alone at a table built for dozens, in a room that echoed with everything he'd just made clear. She wasn't a wife. She was a fixture, another piece of furniture in his well-ordered house. Lillian didn't cry. Not then. She finished her meal mechanically, thanked the servants, and walked back to her chambers with her spine straight and her face composed. It was only when she closed the door behind her, only when she was alone in the dark, that she let herself feel it, the crushing weight of what her life had just become. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of silence and routine. Rowan left for the border as promised. Lillian threw herself into learning the household, determined to at least excel at the one role he'd given her. Marcus was patient, walking her through the accounts, introducing her to the staff, explaining the rhythms of the estate. The people were kind. That was something. The cook, Mrs. Hewitt, always made sure Lillian's favorite pastries appeared at breakfast. The groundskeeper's daughter brought her wildflowers from the edge of the forest. Anne became something like a friend, chattering about village gossip while helping Lillian dress. But kindness from servants wasn't the same as connection. And at night, when the manor settled into stillness, Lillian would lie in her too large bed and feel the loneliness seep into her bones. She wrote letters home, cheerful lies about settling in, about the beauty of the northern landscape, about how busy she was learning her new responsibilities. Her mother wrote back with advice about managing staff and maintaining appearances. Her father sent brief notes about politics and alliances. No one asked if she was happy. When Rowan returned 5 weeks later, Lillian had convinced herself things might improve. Surely absence would have given him perspective. Surely he'd want to at least check that she was well. She waited in the drawing room the afternoon his party rode through the gates, wore a dress in deep blue that brought out her eyes. Had Anne arrange her hair. Practiced what she'd say, nothing demanding, nothing emotional, just a simple welcome home. He walked past the drawing room without stopping. She found out from Marcus that he'd gone straight to his study. 3 hours later, he appeared at dinner. There was a new scar on his jaw, thin, already healing. He'd been in a fight, maybe hurt, maybe almost killed. "Welcome back," Lillian said, searching his face. "I heard there was trouble at the border. Nothing I couldn't handle." "You're injured." "Barely." He cut into his food. "The estate accounts. Marcus said you've been reviewing them." "I have. I found some discrepancies in the grain storage records. I think one of the distributors has been shorting us." For the first time, something like approval flickered across his face. "Good catch. I'll have it investigated." It was the closest thing to praise he'd ever given her. Lillian felt pathetic for how much that tiny scrap of acknowledgement meant. "I was thinking," she said carefully, "about the winter festival. The staff mentioned it's a tradition here. The household celebrates together before the hardest months. I thought perhaps this year we could cancel it." She blinked. "What?" "The festival. It's a waste of resources. We're heading into a difficult winter. The northern crops underperformed and we'll need every spare bushel for spring planting." "But it's tradition. The staff looks forward to The staff will survive without a party." He didn't even look up. "Is there anything else?" "Yes," Lillian wanted to scream. "Yes, there's everything else. There's the fact that I exist, that I moved my entire life here, that I wake up every day in a house that feels like a tomb, and the only person who could make it bearable won't even look at me." But she'd learned. Emotion got her nowhere with Rowan Blackridge. "No," she said quietly. "Nothing else." Winter deepened and Lillian discovered what it truly meant to be invisible. Rowan was there, physically present in the manor, but he might as well have been a ghost. He rose before dawn, worked until late into the night. When they crossed paths in hallways, he'd nod and keep walking. At the dinners she stopped bothering to dress up for, he'd ask about household matters with all the warmth of a business transaction. She tried everything. She memorized details about his work and asked intelligent questions. He gave brief answers and changed subjects. She learned about the political situation in the region and offered insights. He acknowledged them with a grunt and nothing more. She stayed quiet and let him eat in peace. He didn't notice. It didn't matter what she did. She could have been anyone. She could have been no one. The worst part was watching him with everyone else. With Marcus, he was almost friendly. They'd share a dry joke about supply issues. With his guards, he was respectful, asking about their families. Even with the stable master, he'd stop and have a full conversation about the horses. But with her? With his wife? Nothing. A wall of ice she couldn't crack no matter how hard she tried. Christmas came and went, no festival, as he'd decreed. The staff exchanged small gifts among themselves, their celebration muted without the Duke's blessing. Lillian gave Anne a warm shawl she'd embroidered herself. Anne had cried and hugged her, and Lillian had felt worse, because even a servant's gratitude highlighted how starved she was for human affection. Rowan gave her a necklace, a beautiful piece, sapphires set in silver, that had clearly cost a fortune and meant absolutely nothing. He'd had Marcus present it to her with a note, "For my wife, on the occasion of our first Christmas. R.B." She wore it to dinner that night. He didn't notice. January brought storms that isolated the manor for weeks at a time. Snow piled against the windows. The world outside disappeared into white, and Lillian felt herself disappearing too. She stopped making efforts at conversation, stopped wearing pretty dresses to dinner, stopped hoping that tomorrow might be different. She was fading, and no one seemed to notice, except Anne. "My lady," the maid said one morning, helping her into a simple gray dress. "Are you well?" "I'm fine." "You barely ate yesterday, or the day before." "I'm just not hungry." Anne's reflection in the mirror looked worried. "You're too thin, and you never smile anymore." Lillian's throat tightened. "There's not much to smile about. His Grace, he doesn't mean to be cruel, I think. He's just what?" Lillian turned to face her. "Just cold? Just distant? Just completely incapable of treating me like a human being?" Anne looked stricken. "I shouldn't have said anything. I'm sorry, my lady." The anger drained out of Lillian as quickly as it had come. She wasn't angry at Anne. She was angry at herself, for caring, for trying, for being stupid enough to hope. "No, I'm sorry," she said softly. "You've been nothing but kind to me. You're the only one in this house who has." That night, lying in bed, Lillian admitted something to herself she'd been avoiding for months. She was lonely, achingly, desperately lonely. And it was killing her, not physically, not yet. But something inside her was dying, the part that laughed, that hoped, that believed she deserved to be loved. Every day in this beautiful, cold manor stripped away another piece of who she'd been. She thought about her mother's last words before she'd left home. A duchess must be strong. She must endure. But what was the point of enduring if you lost yourself in the process? What was the point of survival if you were already dead inside? February came, and with it, a breaking point Lillian hadn't seen coming. It started with a letter from her sister. Emily had gotten engaged, to a man she actually loved. The letter was full of joy, excitement, plans for a spring wedding. Every word radiated happiness, and Lillian was glad for her, truly. But reading it felt like swallowing glass, because Emily would have what Lillian would never have. A husband who wanted her. A marriage built on more than contracts and duty. A future that held something other than endless, echoing silence. She set the letter down and looked around her sitting room. Beautiful furniture, fresh flowers that Anne replaced every few days, books she'd stopped reading because she couldn't focus. Everything perfect and empty and suffocating. When had she last felt alive? When had she last felt anything at all? That night at dinner, another silent, mechanical affair, Rowan actually spoke first. "I'll be traveling to the capital next month," he said. "The king's requested my presence at court. I'll need you to accompany me." Lillian's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "You want me to come with you?" "Want has nothing to do with it. You're my wife. Appearances matter. The court will expect to see us together." "Of course, appearances. How long will we be gone?" 2 weeks, possibly 3. "And what will be expected of me?" "Attend functions, smile, make polite conversation, represent the family appropriately." He said it like he was listing tasks for a servant. "Marcus will help you prepare. You'll need appropriate gowns, jewelry. We can't look provincial." Something inside Lillian snapped. "We?" she said quietly. "We can't look provincial. As if we're a unit. As if we're partners." Rowan glanced up, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Is there a problem?" "Yes, Rowan, there's a problem." He set down his utensils. "Then speak plainly. I don't have time for games." "Games?" A laugh bubbled up, bitter and sharp. You think this is a game? I've been here 6 months. 6 months of trying to be a good wife, a good duchess, a good anything that might make you see me as something other than a piece of furniture. And now you want me to go to court and pretend we have a marriage? His expression hardened. We do have a marriage. No, we have an arrangement. A very cold, very lonely arrangement where I eat dinner across from a stranger every night and pretend it's normal to live like this. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. Her voice cracked. Do you even know anything about me, Rowan? My favorite color? What I like to read? What I dream about? Do you care? I know you're competent with the household accounts. I know you handle your responsibilities adequately. What else matters? The words hit like a physical blow. Lillian stood abruptly, her chair scraping against stone. Everything else matters. Everything you've decided isn't worth your time. I'm a person, not a ledger entry. I have thoughts and feelings, and I'm so tired of pretending I don't. Rowan stood too, his jaw tight. I have given you everything, a home, security, status. What more do you want? I want you to see me. The words tore out of her. I want to matter. I want to be more than just the woman who will give you heirs someday. I want, her voice broke, I want to not feel so alone. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been guilt or pain or recognition. Then it was gone, shuttered behind that familiar ice. I don't know what you expected, he said coldly. I was clear about what this marriage was from the beginning. You were clear about what it wasn't. But I thought... Lillian pressed a hand to her chest, trying to hold herself together. I thought maybe we could build something. Maybe not love, but at least companionship, friendship, something. I don't need friends. I need a functioning household and a stable duchy. And I needed a husband who could at least pretend I'm human. Rowan's expression shuddered completely. If you're unhappy, I apologize. But I won't pretend to be someone I'm not to soothe your feelings. I am what I am. This is what I can offer. If that's not enough, I don't know what to tell you. The resignation in his voice was worse than anger would have been. Because he meant it. He genuinely didn't see a problem. Didn't think there was anything wrong with a marriage where one person slowly faded into nothing while the other barely noticed. Lillian felt something inside her go very still and very cold. You're right, she said quietly. You can't give me what I need, because you don't have it to give. She walked out of the dining room, leaving him standing there alone. The next morning, Lillian woke with absolute clarity. She couldn't do this anymore, not for duty, not for family, not for a title or security, or any of the practical reasons she'd convinced herself mattered. She couldn't slowly disappear in a house that didn't want her, married to a man who looked through her like she was glass. She couldn't keep dying by inches. For the first time in months, Lillian felt something other than grief or loneliness. She felt determination. She'd given this marriage 6 months. She'd tried everything, and Rowan had made it abundantly clear nothing would change, so she would change the situation. She sat at the writing desk in her sitting room, pulled out a fresh piece of parchment, and began to write. Rowan, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not to court, not anywhere you'd expect. I'm returning to my family. I know what that means, scandal, shame, broken alliances. I know my father will be furious and your reputation will take a hit. I'm sorry for that. Truly. But I won't die here pretending I am loved. I won't fade away in a beautiful house with a husband who can't even see me long enough to notice I'm disappearing. You gave me security, status, everything you promised. But you forgot that I'm a person who needs more than a roof over her head. I need to be seen, to be known, to matter to someone, even a little. I don't blame you for being who you are, but I can't be who I need to be here. I hope you find what you're looking for in this life. I hope your duchy thrives, and your borders stay safe, and your accounts always balance. I hope someday you understand what you lost when you decided caring was weakness. Goodbye, Rowan. Lillian. She sealed the letter, placed it on his desk in the study while he was out inspecting the southern fields. Then she packed a single bag, kissed Anne on the cheek, slipped Marcus an envelope containing a month's wages as thanks for his kindness, and walked out of Thornmar Hall into the February cold. The snow had stopped. The roads were passable. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Lillian had no idea what would happen next. No idea if her family would even take her back. No idea how she'd survive the scandal. But as she climbed into the hired carriage that would take her toward the only home she'd ever really known, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. And underneath it, buried but growing stronger with every mile, freedom. The carriage wheels hit a rut and Lillian's head jerked against the window. She'd been staring at the landscape for hours now, watching Thornmar's territory fade into familiar rolling hills, the snow-covered fields giving way to the gentler countryside of her childhood home. She should have felt relief. Freedom, like she'd told herself. Instead, her stomach twisted tighter with every mile. What had she done? The rational part of her brain, the part that sounded suspiciously like her mother, screamed that she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Duchesses didn't just leave. Women didn't abandon their marriages, no matter how cold, no matter how lonely. The scandal alone would destroy her family's standing. Her father had brokered this alliance specifically to secure House Vance's position in the North, and she'd just set fire to all of it. But the other part of her, the part that had been slowly suffocating under Rowan's indifference, whispered that staying would have been worse, that you couldn't build a life from silence, that she deserved more than being invisible in her own marriage. The sun was setting when the carriage finally rolled through the gates of Vance Hall. Home. Except it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt smaller than she remembered, shabbier. The gardens her mother had been so proud of looked overgrown, the fountain in the courtyard cracked and dry. Had it always been this run down, or had 6 months at Thornmar's immaculate estate changed her perception? The driver helped her down. Her legs were stiff, her back aching from the long journey. She stood there for a moment, bag in hand, staring at the front door. It opened before she could knock. Her younger sister Emily stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "Lily?" "Hi, Em. What are you—" Emily's gaze dropped to the travel bag. "Oh, no. Oh, Lily, what did you do?" Before Lillian could answer, her mother appeared behind Emily, face draining of color. "Lillian, what are you doing here?" "I left him," Lillian said, and saying it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been during the journey. "I left Rowan." Her mother swayed, actually swayed like the words had physically struck her. "Get inside," she hissed. "Now, before the servants see." The warmth Lillian had been hoping for, the maternal embrace, the assurance that everything would be okay, never came. Instead, her mother practically dragged her into the study, shut the door, and rounded on her with fury in her eyes. "Tell me you're joking." "I'm not. You left the Duke of Thornmar. You abandoned your marriage." "Mother, he barely acknowledged I existed. I was drowning there." "Drowning?" Her mother's voice climbed. "You were a duchess. You had everything. I had nothing that mattered. What matters is duty, responsibility. Your father negotiated for months to secure that alliance. Do you have any idea what you've just done to this family?" Emily hovered near the door, looking stricken. "Maybe if we just—" "Be quiet, Emily." Their mother didn't take her eyes off Lillian. "Where's your husband? Does he know where you are?" "I left him a letter." "A letter?" The words came out flat, disbelieving. "You ended your marriage with a letter." "I tried talking to him for 6 months. He didn't care. He never cared." "Of course he didn't care about your feelings. He's a duke with a territory to run. You were supposed to manage the household, produce heirs, and maintain the alliance. That's what noble marriages are." Lillian felt something crack in her chest. "So I was supposed to just endure forever? Pretend I wasn't dying inside?" "Yes," her mother's voice cracked like a whip. "That's exactly what you were supposed to do. That's what women like us have always done. You think I married your father for love? You think any of this—" She gestured wildly at the room, the house, their entire life. "Is about happiness?" The words hung in the air like poison. Emily made a small, wounded sound. Lillian stared at her mother, seeing her clearly for maybe the first time, the tight lines around her mouth, the permanent disappointment in her eyes. The way she held herself like she was made of glass that might shatter if she relaxed for even a moment. "I'm sorry," Lillian whispered. "I'm sorry you settled for that. But I can't. You don't have a choice. Do you understand what you've done? The Duke of Thornmar could annul this marriage. He could claim you abandoned him, failed in your duties. Your father could lose everything, the trade agreements, the protection, the political standing we worked decades to build. Maybe that's not my problem. Her mother's hand cracked across Lillian's cheek. The sound echoed in the study. Emily gasped. Lillian stood frozen, one hand rising to her burning face. "How dare you?" her mother breathed. "How dare you be so selfish?" The study door burst open. Lillian's father stood there, taking in the scene, his wife trembling with rage, Lillian with a red mark blooming on her cheek, Emily crying quietly in the corner. "What in the name of—" He spotted Lillian. "Why is my daughter here?" "She left him," her mother said. "She left the Duke and came crawling back home like a child who doesn't want to eat her vegetables." Lord Vance's face went purple. "She what? Father, please, get out!" His voice was ice. "Get out of my house!" Lillian felt the floor drop out from under her. "What?" "You heard me. I won't harbor a runaway wife, especially not one who just destroyed everything I've worked for. I'm your daughter. You stopped being my daughter the moment you married into House Blackridge. You became the Duke's problem. And if you can't handle that, you certainly aren't welcome here." "Richard," her mother started. "No," he cut her off. "She made her choice. She can live with it. I have 2 other daughters to marry off, and a son who'll need alliances of his own someday. I won't let her ruin their prospects too." Emily was openly sobbing now. "Father, please, she's our sister." "One more word, Emily, and you'll join her." Silence crashed down. Lillian looked at her father, the man who'd taught her to ride, who'd read her stories when she was small, who'd walked her down the aisle just 6 months ago. He looked back at her like she was a stranger, like she was a liability he needed to eliminate. "I see," Lillian said quietly. Her voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. "I understand." She turned toward the door. Her legs felt numb. Everything felt numb. "Lily, wait." Emily reached for her. "Don't," her father snapped. Lillian walked out of the study, through the entrance hall, past servants who quickly averted their eyes. She made it to the front steps before her knees buckled. The night air was freezing. She had nowhere to go. No money beyond the few coins in her pocket. No plan. No. "My lady." She looked up. The carriage driver who'd brought her from Thornmar stood by his horses, concern on his weathered face. "I heard," he said simply. "Servants talk. Where can I take you?" Lillian's mind was blank. I don't know." He helped her into the carriage, his movements gentle. "There's an inn about 5 miles east, clean place, the owner's decent. I can get you there." "I don't have enough to pay you for—" "Already paid, my lady. The Duke covered my services for a week. Figured you might need it." Something about that, about Rowan's efficiency extending even to planning for her departure, made Lillian want to laugh and cry at the same time. The inn was small, but warm. The owner, a broad-shouldered woman named Marta, took one look at Lillian's face and asked no questions. Just showed her to her room, brought her tea and bread, and left her alone. Lillian sat on the narrow bed, still wearing her cloak, and finally let herself feel it. She'd burned everything, her marriage, her family, her entire life, and she had no idea what came next. The tea went cold in her hands. Outside, snow started falling again. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The inn creaked and settled around her. For the first time since leaving Thornmar, Lillian cried. Not pretty tears. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the girl who'd married a duke full of hope. For the woman who'd tried so hard to be enough. For the family who'd tossed her out like garbage the moment she became inconvenient. She cried until there was nothing left. Then she lay down, pulled the thin blanket over herself, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion dragged her under. Tomorrow, she'd have to figure out what to do. Tonight, she just needed to survive. Whoa. Morning came too soon, and with it, brutal clarity. Lillian had exactly 17 silver pieces to her name. The room cost 2 per night. Food was extra. At this rate, she had maybe a week before she was completely destitute. She couldn't go back to Thornmar. Pride aside, what would be the point? Rowan had made it clear she was just a function, not a person. and her family had literally thrown her out. Which left what? Find work? Doing what? Noble women weren't trained for anything useful. She could read and write, manage household accounts, play the pianoforte, and embroider, none of which translated to employable skills for a woman alone. She was washing her face with cold water from the basin when someone knocked. "My lady?" Marta's voice came through the door. "You have a visitor." Lillian's heart jumped. Had her father reconsidered? Or worse, had Rowan already sent someone to drag her back? She opened the door. A woman stood in the hallway, mid-50s, dressed in traveling clothes with sharp eyes that took in Lillian's rumpled dress and unbrushed hair in one assessing glance. "Lady Blackridge," the woman said. "I'm Claire Ashford. May I come in?" Lillian didn't recognize the name, but something about the woman's bearing suggested refusing would be unwise. Of course. Claire swept into the room, taking in the sparse furnishings with a single glance. "I'm a friend of your husband's steward, Marcus. He's concerned about you." "Marcus sent you?" "In a manner of speaking, he mentioned your situation. I happened to be traveling through the area." Claire's expression softened slightly. "He thinks highly of you, said you were wasted at Thornmar." Lillian sank onto the bed. "I don't understand. Why would you—" "Because I was you, 20 years ago." Claire pulled up the room's only chair and sat. "Different circumstances, same problem. Married a man who saw me as property, left him. My family disowned me. I ended up in a situation not unlike yours." "What did you do?" "Survived, then thrived." Claire leaned forward. "I'm going to be direct, Lady Blackridge. You have no money, no family support, and no prospects. Within a month, you'll be desperate enough to accept any position offered, which means you'll end up as some merchant's mistress or worse." Lillian flinched. "I wouldn't—" "You would? Because starvation is a powerful motivator." Claire's tone wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. "But there's another option. I run an estate about 30 miles from here. It's unconventional. I take in women who have nowhere else to go. We work the land, run a textile operation, maintain independence." "You're offering me charity." "I'm offering you a chance to work. Hard work. The kind that'll destroy your soft hands and leave you exhausted every night. But you'd be safe, fed, and you'd earn your keep honestly." Lillian's pride bristled. A duke's wife reduced to manual labor? Then she looked at her reflection in the small mirror across the room. Pale, thin, desperate. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "What would I have to do?" Claire smiled. "Everything we all do. Tend the gardens, work the looms, cook, clean, help with the animals. No one's above any task." "I don't know how to do most of that." "You'll learn, or you'll leave. I don't keep dead weight." Claire stood. "I'm heading back tomorrow morning. If you want to come, be ready at dawn. If not, I wish you luck. You'll need it." She headed for the door, then paused. "One more thing. At my estate, we don't use titles. No ladies or misters. You'd just be Lillian. Can you handle that? Being no one. Having nothing. Starting over from absolute zero. It sounded terrifying. It also sounded like the only real option she had. "I'll be ready," Lillian said. Claire nodded and left. Lillian sat in the silence, processing. This wasn't how any of this was supposed to go. She'd imagined, what? That leaving Rowan would feel triumphant? That her family would support her? That somehow everything would work out? Instead, she'd lost everything and was about to become a laborer on some stranger's farm. But she was still breathing, still fighting. That had to count for something. Meanwhile, back at Thornmar Hall, Rowan Blackridge's world was imploding in slow motion. He'd found the letter around noon when he'd returned from the southern fields to review contracts. It had been sitting on his desk, her handwriting neat and precise. He'd read it 3 times before the words actually registered. "I won't die here pretending I am loved." Then he'd done something he hadn't done since he was a boy. He'd panicked. "Marcus!" His voice echoed through the manor. "Marcus!" The steward appeared, already looking grim. "Your Grace. Where is she?" "Gone, Your Grace. Left yesterday evening while you were out." "And you didn't think to inform me?" Marcus met his eyes steadily. She asked me not to. And frankly, Your Grace, I thought she was right to go. The words hit like a fist. Rowan stared at the man who'd served his family for 3 decades. You what? I said she was right to go. I've watched you treat that girl like furniture for 6 months. Watched her try everything to reach you. Watched her fade. Marcus's voice hardened. I've served this house since your father's time. I kept my mouth shut through a lot. But watching you do to her what your father did to your mother, I'm done staying quiet. Rowan felt something cold flood his veins. Don't. Why not? Someone needs to say it. You've become him. Cold, closed off, so focused on control and duty that you can't see the people right in front of you bleeding. Your lady wife deserved better. She has everything. She had nothing that mattered, nothing but a husband who couldn't spare her 5 minutes of genuine attention. Marcus's composure cracked. That girl sat in the drawing room every afternoon for 2 months, hoping you'd join her for tea, just a conversation, and you walked past that room every single day and never stopped. Rowan hadn't known that, hadn't noticed. The realization made him sick. Where did she go? He asked, his voice rough. Her family's estate. Where else would she go? Rowan was already moving, grabbing his coat. Prepare my horse. Your Grace? Now, Marcus. The ride to Vance Hall took 3 hours of hard riding through snow and frozen mud. By the time Rowan reached the gates, his horse was lathered and his hands were numb. Lord Vance met him in the entrance hall, and one look at the man's face told Rowan everything. She's not here, Vance said flatly. Where is she? I don't know. I sent her away. Rowan's hand went to his sword before he could think. You what? Don't take that tone with me, boy. Your wife came here crying about being unhappy. I don't harbor runaway wives. She made her choice when she left you. She's your daughter. She's your wife, and your problem. Vance's expression was stone. I have a family to protect, alliances to maintain. I can't afford the scandal she'd bring. Rowan stared at him, really looked at him, saw the calculation, the political maneuvering, the complete absence of concern for Lillian's well-being, and saw himself reflected back. You bastard, Rowan breathed. Excuse me? She came to you for help and you threw her out. Your own child. I did what was necessary, as you should have done, kept her happy enough that she didn't run in the first place. Vance shrugged. Though I suppose that would have required you to actually notice her, wouldn't it? The words were designed to cut, and they did, because they were true. Rowan left without another word, rode back to Thornmar in a daze. Spent the night in his study, Lillian's letter spread on his desk, reading it over and over. I won't die here pretending I am loved. Had he really made her feel like she was dying? He thought back over the past 6 months, trying to see it from her perspective. The silent dinners, the avoided conversations, the way he'd treated her existence as an inconvenience rather than a gift. He'd given her everything material, and nothing that mattered, just like his father had done to his mother. Rowan stood abruptly, knocking over his chair, crossed to the window. Outside, Thornmar's grounds stretched into darkness. Everything perfect, everything controlled, everything empty. Somewhere out in that darkness was his wife, alone, possibly scared, definitely hurting. Because of him. For the first time in 10 years, Rowan Blackridge felt something crack in the armor he'd built around himself. Not quite guilt, not quite grief. Something worse. The terrible realization that he'd destroyed something precious without even noticing until it was gone. And he had no idea how to fix it. The next morning, Lillian stood outside the inn as dawn broke, her single bag at her feet. Claire pulled up in a wagon loaded with supplies, another woman beside her in the driver's seat. This is Ruth, Claire said. She helps run things. Ruth, this is Lillian. Ruth nodded. She was younger than Claire, maybe early 30s, with calloused hands and a no-nonsense expression. You know how to handle farm work? No, Lillian admitted. At least she's honest. Ruth almost smiled. Climb in back. It's a rough ride. The wagon was packed with sacks of grain, tools, and what looked like wool bundles. Lillian wedged herself between 2 crates and held on as they lurched into motion. The journey took most of the day. They stopped once to water the horses and eat a quick meal of bread and cheese. Claire and Ruth talked about planting schedules, a broken loom that needed repairs, someone named Sarah who was pregnant and couldn't lift heavy loads anymore. It was so ordinary, so far removed from the world of noble politics and arranged marriages and men who looked through their wives like glass. Lillian found it weirdly comforting. They reached the estate as the sun was setting. It wasn't grand like Thornmar or even Vance Hall, just a large farmhouse surrounded by fields, several outbuildings, and what looked like a barn and workshop. But smoke rose from the chimneys, lights glowed in windows, and when Claire called out, women emerged, maybe a dozen of them, ranging from a girl who couldn't be more than 16 to an older woman with gray hair. "Everyone, this is Lillian," Claire announced. "She'll be staying with us. Lillian, welcome to Ashford Commons." The women nodded, introducing themselves in a blur of names Lillian knew she wouldn't remember. Mary, Beth, Sarah, Joan, Catherine. "You'll bunk with Elizabeth," Claire continued, pointing to a woman about Lillian's age with kind eyes. "She'll show you the routine. Breakfast at dawn, work starts right after. Everyone pulls their weight, no exceptions." Elizabeth smiled. "Come on, I'll show you where to put your things." The room was small, just 2 narrow beds, a shared wardrobe, and a wash basin. But it was clean and warm, and Elizabeth chattered cheerfully as she helped Lillian unpack. "Don't let Claire scare you. She's tough but fair, and the work's hard, yeah, but it's good. Better than—" She stopped. "Sorry, we don't really talk about our befores here. Fresh starts and all." "I understand," Lillian said softly. That night she ate dinner in a crowded kitchen with women who laughed and teased and argued over who'd burned the biscuits. No one asked about her title. No one cared that she'd been a duchess. She was just Lillian. One of them. And when she finally lay down in her narrow bed, exhausted and overwhelmed and terrified of what tomorrow would bring, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Small, fragile, easily crushed. But there. 2 weeks passed in a blur of back-breaking work and small revelations. Lillian learned that her hands could blister and bleed and keep working, that her back could scream with pain from hours bent over the garden beds and still function the next day, that she could fall into bed so exhausted she barely remembered her own name and wake up ready to do it all again. She learned which plants needed sun and which preferred shade, how to card wool without tangling it, the rhythm of the loom, the patience required for even stitches. She learned to cook in huge batches, to preserve food, to waste nothing. And she learned that the women of Ashford Commons carried their own wounds. Elizabeth had been married to a merchant who beat her. Sarah's family sold her to settle debts. Ruth had been a lady's maid accused of theft when she rejected her employer's advances. Mary was a widow with no sons, which meant her husband's family threw her out the day he died. Every woman here had a story. Every woman had survived something that should have broken her, and every woman chose to keep fighting. "You're getting better," Claire said one afternoon, watching Lillian work the loom. Fewer mistakes. Lillian's hands were raw despite the salve Ruth made, but the fabric was taking shape. "I'm trying." "I can see that." Claire paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why didn't you fight to stay in your marriage? You're a duchess. You had power." Lillian's hands stilled. "I didn't feel powerful. I felt invisible." "But you left. That took courage. Or stupidity, I'm not sure which." Claire laughed. "Both, probably. The bravest things usually are." She touched Lillian's shoulder briefly. "You'll figure it out. Who you are without the title, without the marriage, without everything you thought defined you. It's terrifying, but it's also freedom." That night, lying in bed while Elizabeth snored softly across the room, Lillian thought about that. Who was she? Stripped of everything. Not Lady Blackridge, not the Vance daughter her father had traded for political advantage, not the wife Rowan couldn't be bothered to notice. Just Lillian. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was actually more than she'd ever been before. She was still mulling over that thought when Elizabeth suddenly sat up. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Lillian listened. There. Hoofbeats. Fast. Multiple riders approaching. Both women scrambled to the window. In the moonlight, they could see torches. Men on horseback, maybe 6 or 7 of them, riding hard toward the farmhouse. Raiders, Elizabeth breathed. Sometimes they come through, looking for easy targets. Downstairs, Claire was already shouting orders. "Everyone up! Bar the doors! Get the weapons!" Lillian's heart hammered. Weapons? What weapons? But the women were already moving with practiced efficiency. Someone produced a rifle. Someone else grabbed a pitchfork. Mary was loading a crossbow with steady hands. "Can you shoot?" Ruth thrust a pistol at Lillian. No, I never." "Then stay in the middle. If anyone gets through, aim and pull the trigger. It's not complicated." The riders circled the house, whooping and laughing. One of them fired a shot into the air. "We know you're in there, ladies," a man's voice called out, thick with drink and menace. "Why don't you come out and be friendly? We've had a long ride." "And you can ride straight back where you came from," Claire shouted through a window. "This is private property." "Private property with no men to protect it," another voice, younger. "What are you going to do, throw dishcloths at us?" The women exchanged looks. Lillian saw something pass between them, determination, anger, and a kind of fierce solidarity. "On 3, Claire said quietly. "Windows and doors. Show them we're not defenseless." 1, Lillian's hand shook on the pistol. 2. The raiders were spreading out, some dismounting. 3. 6 windows and the front door flew open simultaneously. 7 women with 7 weapons aimed outward. The crack of the rifle was deafening. Claire had fired a warning shot that took the hat clean off the lead raider's head. "Next one's between your eyes," she roared. "We don't need men to protect us. Now get off our land before I show you what else we can do." For a moment, no one moved. Then Ruth fired her pistol into the ground near the nearest horse. It reared, throwing its rider. "She means it!" Mary yelled, her crossbow trained on another man. "We all do!" The raiders looked at each other, looked at the women bristling with weapons in fury, looked at their friends scrambling in the mud. Then, cursing and muttering, they mounted up and rode off into the darkness. The women held their positions until the hoofbeats faded completely. Then Claire lowered her rifle and started laughing. "Did you see their faces? Thought we'd be easy prey." The tension broke. Everyone was laughing, adrenaline and relief flooding through them. Lillian realized she was still holding the pistol, still shaking. Elizabeth gently took it from her hands. "First time's always scary," she said. "But you stood with us. That matters." Later, when everyone had gone back to bed and the house was quiet again, Lillian lay awake thinking. A month ago, she'd been a duchess who couldn't even get her husband to look at her. Tonight, she'd stood shoulder to shoulder with women who'd taught themselves to fight rather than be victims. She thought about Rowan's belief that showing emotion was weakness, about her father's certainty that a woman's only value was in the alliance she could bring. They were wrong. Strength wasn't cold control. It wasn't political maneuvering or maintaining appearances. Strength was this: women who'd lost everything, teaching themselves to survive, standing together against threats, refusing to be broken. And for the first time since leaving Thornmar, Lillian felt something shift inside her. She wasn't just running anymore. She was becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone who didn't need a title or a husband or family approval to matter. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, surrounded by women who'd chosen survival over surrender, Lillian finally fell asleep and didn't dream of Thornmar Hall at all. Spring came to Ashford Commons like a promise kept. The snow melted, revealing muddy earth that the women worked from dawn until their backs screamed. Lillian's hands, once soft and manicured, were now calloused and scarred. Her face had color from hours in the sun. Her arms had muscle from hauling water, chopping wood, working the looms until her fingers cramped. She barely recognized herself in the reflection of the wash basin, and she liked who she was becoming. "You're smiling," Elizabeth noted one morning as they worked side by side in the vegetable garden, planting early carrots. "You do that now. Smile." "Do I?" "All the time. It's nice. When you first got here, you looked like you were carved from ice." Lillian laughed. Something else she did more often now. "I felt like ice, or maybe glass. Something fragile that was about to shatter. And now? Now I feel solid, real." She patted down the soil around a seedling. like I actually exist. You always existed, Lily, not where I came from. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the morning sun warming their backs. In the distance, Sarah was hanging laundry, her pregnancy belly visible under her loose dress. Mary was chopping wood with steady, practiced swings. Claire was somewhere in the workshop, fixing that damn loom that seemed to break every other week. This place had become home in a way Thornmar Hall never had. Maybe because here, Lillian had earned her place. Every meal, every warm bed, every moment of safety came from her own labor. Nothing was given. Everything was earned. It made all the difference. "Riders coming!" Ruth's voice cut through the morning calm. Everyone stopped, looked up. Ruth was on the roof. She'd been repairing shingles and had a clear view of the road. "How many?" Claire emerged from the workshop, wiping grease from her hands. "Just one, coming fast." Lillian's stomach tightened. They'd had 3 more incidents with raiders in the past month. Small groups, easily driven off, but the attacks were getting bolder. Last time, one of the men had managed to break a window before Mary put a crossbow bolt through his shoulder. "Get the rifles," Claire ordered, standard positions. But as the rider came into view cresting the hill, Lillian's blood went cold. She knew that horse, knew the way the man sat in the saddle, rigid and controlled even at a gallop. "It's Rowan," she whispered. Elizabeth grabbed her arm. "Your husband." "He found me." "Lily, you don't have to—" "Get inside," Claire commanded. "All of you, now." "But now!" The women scattered. Lillian stood frozen for a moment, torn between running and what? What did she even want to do? Elizabeth physically pulled her toward the house. "Come on, let Claire handle this." They watched from the windows as Rowan Blackridge, Duke of Thornmar, rode up to Ashford Commons like he was leading a cavalry charge. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his travel cloak mud-splattered, his face exhausted. He looked like he'd been riding for days. Claire met him in the yard, rifle in hand. "That's close enough." Rowan stopped. His eyes scanned the buildings, the fields, finally landing on the farmhouse. "I'm looking for my wife." "Your wife left you." "I'd say that means she doesn't want to be found." "I need to speak with her." "No." Claire's voice was flat. "You need to leave. This is private property and you're not welcome." "I'm not leaving without seeing her." "Then you're going to have a problem, Your Grace." Claire raised the rifle slightly. "Because I protect the women here, and that includes protecting them from men who made them desperate enough to run in the first place." Rowan's jaw tightened. For a moment, Lillian thought he might actually try to force his way in. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the way his hand moved toward his sword. Then something in his posture changed, collapsed, almost. "Please," he said, and the words sounded like it cost him everything. "I just need to talk to her 5 minutes. Then if she tells me to leave, I'll go. I swear it." Claire looked back at the house. At the window where Lillian stood, visible enough that Rowan could see her if he looked. He did look. Their eyes met across the distance. Lillian's heart was hammering so hard she felt sick. Part of her wanted to run out there, demand answers. Part of her wanted to hide. Part of her, a part she hated, wanted to hear what he had to say. "It's your choice, Lily," Claire called. "I'll send him away if you want." The power of that statement nearly broke her. Her choice. Not Rowan's. Not her father's. Hers. After a long moment, Lillian stepped out onto the porch. Rowan took a step toward her. Claire moved to block him. "From there," Claire said. "You talk from there." He nodded, looking at Lillian with an expression she'd never seen before. Desperation mixed with something that might have been fear. "You came all this way," Lillian said, proud that her voice stayed steady. "Why?" "Because I was wrong." "About what, specifically? About treating me like furniture? About ignoring me for 6 months? About making me feel like I was dying inside your perfect, cold house?" Each word hit like a slap. Rowan flinched. "All of it," he said roughly. "I was wrong about all of it." "Congratulations. You figured that out. A little late, don't you think?" "Lillian, please." "No." She descended the porch steps, anger giving her courage. "You don't get to please me. You don't get to ride up here after 2 months and expect me to just—" "What? Come back?" Pretend everything's fine? I don't expect that. I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know. His voice cracked. I didn't see it. How badly I was hurting you. I didn't let myself see it. Why not? The question hung in the air. Behind Lillian, she could feel the other women watching, protecting her with their presence. Rowan looked at the ground, because seeing it would have meant feeling something. And I spent 10 years teaching myself not to feel anything. After my mother died, after the war, after everything, caring about things meant being weak, meant being vulnerable. So I just stopped. That's not an excuse. I know. It's an explanation. A terrible one. He finally met her eyes again. You deserve better. You deserved a husband who saw you, who valued you, who made you feel like you mattered. Instead, you got me. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Lillian. The apology should have felt good, should have been satisfying. Instead, it just made her tired. I needed to hear that 2 months ago, she said quietly, when I was still in your house, trying everything I could think of to reach you. I needed it when I was sitting alone at that massive table every night, talking to silence. I needed it when I wrote you that letter, my hands shaking because I was so terrified of what would happen, but more terrified of staying. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what you did to me? I'm trying to. Rowan's composure was cracking piece by piece. Marcus told me about the tea, about how you waited every afternoon hoping I'd join you. I didn't even know. I walked past that room every day and I never even looked inside. Lillian felt tears burn behind her eyes. She refused to let them fall. I'm not coming back, she said. The words landed like stones. Lillian, I mean it, Rowan. I can't go back to being that person, the one who made herself smaller and quieter and less, hoping it would make you notice her. I won't do it again. I'm not asking you to. He took a half step forward. Claire raised the rifle. He stopped. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be different, that I can be what you needed me to be. It's too late for that. Is it? His voice turned raw. Is it really? Because I rode for 3 days straight to find you. I searched every inn, every town, asked everyone I could find if they'd seen you. I've been sleeping in barns and eating whatever I could find because the thought of you out here alone, thinking I didn't care, was driving me insane. That's not my problem. You're right. It's mine. But Lillian, please. He was begging now, and the proud Duke of Thornmar looked like he was on the verge of falling apart. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I destroyed what we could have had, but I'm asking anyway. Let me prove I can change. Let me show you I can be the husband you needed. Words are cheap, Rowan. Then I'll show you with actions, whatever you need, whatever it takes. Lillian looked at him, really looked at him. He was a mess, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes rumpled, his usual rigid control completely shattered. Part of her, the part that had loved the idea of him, the hope of what they could be, wanted to believe it. But the part that had survived the past 2 months, the part that had learned what real strength looked like, knew better. Go home, she said. Go back to Thornmar, and your duchy, and your perfectly ordered life. Find someone else to give you heirs, someone who won't expect things like love or partnership or basic human decency. I don't want someone else. You didn't want me either, not really. I was wrong. Being wrong doesn't fix this. The shout tore out of her. Being sorry doesn't undo 6 months of feeling invisible. It doesn't erase the fact that my own husband couldn't be bothered to learn my favorite color, or ask about my day, or touch me like I was someone he might actually care about. Silence crashed down. Rowan looked like she'd shot him. I'm done bleeding for you, Lillian said, her voice breaking. I'm done hoping and trying and making myself smaller. I'm happy here. These women see me. They value me. I matter here, and I won't give that up to go back to being your convenient wife. She turned and walked back into the house. Lillian, wait. Claire stepped in front of him. You heard her. Time to go, Your Grace. I need more time. I need to explain. You've had your say. Now leave. I'm not leaving. Not like this. Then I'll have the local magistrate remove you for trespassing. Rowan's expression hardened into something desperate. Fine. I'll wait. I'll camp on the road. I'll stay until she agrees to hear me out properly. That's pathetic. I don't care. His voice turned fierce. I lost her once because I was too proud and too stupid to see what I had. I won't make that mistake again. I'll wait as long as it takes. Claire studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, something like respect flickered across her face. Your funeral, she said, and walked back to the house. Inside, Lillian was shaking. Elizabeth had her arm around her shoulders. You okay? Elizabeth asked softly. I don't know. Lillian sank into a chair. I don't know what I feel. You did good. Standing up to him like that. Did I? Or did I just make everything worse? Through the window, they could see Rowan leading his horse off the property, but he didn't ride away. He stopped maybe 100 yards down the road, in clear view of the farmhouse, and he started setting up a camp. Is he serious? Mary asked, joining them at the window. Looks like it, Ruth said. Stubborn bastard. Claire came in, shaking her head. Well, this complicates things. What do we do? Sarah asked. Nothing. He wants to sleep in the mud and eat cold food. That's his choice. We continue as normal. But nothing felt normal after that. Rowan stayed. Day after day he stayed. He set up a proper camp, a small tent, a fire pit. He had supplies brought from town, but he never approached the farmhouse again. Just stayed visible, a constant reminder of everything Lillian was trying to forget. This is insane, Elizabeth muttered on the third day, watching him through the window. What's his endgame? Proving he means it, I guess, Lillian said, unable to look away. By camping in the rain? Because it was raining. Had been raining for 2 days straight. Cold spring rain that turned everything to mud. And Rowan sat in it, wrapped in a cloak, staring at the farmhouse. He's going to get sick, Mary said. Not our problem, Claire said firmly, but even she looked uncomfortable. On the 5th day, Elizabeth came running into the house. Lily, you need to see this. Lillian dropped the yarn she was spinning and followed Elizabeth outside. Rowan was still there, but now he wasn't alone. Her father's carriage was parked on the road. Lord Vance stood in front of Rowan's tent, looking furious. Absolutely humiliating, her father was shouting. The Duke of Thornmar camping on the side of the road like a beggar. Have you lost your mind? Probably, Rowan said. His voice was hoarse from days in the cold. But I'm not leaving. This is about that girl? About Lillian? Your daughter. Yes. She's not worth this. She abandoned her duties, destroyed our alliance. She left because I failed her. Rowan stood, and even from a distance, Lillian could see the steel in his posture. She left because I was too much of a coward to be the husband she deserved, and I'm not making that mistake again. You're a duke. You can have any woman you want. I don't want any woman. I want my wife. Vance threw up his hands. Fine. Destroy yourself over a girl who wasn't grateful for what she had. But when this becomes a scandal that affects my other daughter's prospects, don't expect me to get out. The words were quiet, but deadly. Excuse me? Get out. Go back to your estate and your political maneuvering and your calculations. Count your coins and your alliances and sleep well knowing you threw away your daughter because she was inconvenient. How dare you? I dare because I've been you. Rowan's voice turned savage. I've been exactly you. Cold, calculating, so focused on control that I couldn't see the person right in front of me bleeding. And I hate what it made me. So yes, I'm sitting in the mud. Yes, I look pathetic. But at least I'm trying to fix what I broke instead of throwing it away. Lord Vance stared at him. Then, without another word, climbed back into his carriage and left. Lillian stood frozen on the porch, her heart in her throat. Rowan sank back down in front of his tent, head in his hands. He'd just destroyed his relationship with her father, one of his key political allies, for her. Still think he doesn't mean it? Elizabeth asked softly. Lillian didn't answer, couldn't answer. That night, the temperature dropped. Frost covered the ground. From her window, Lillian could see Rowan's fire struggling against the wind. She should go to bed, should ignore him, should let him freeze if he was stupid enough to stay out there. Instead, she found herself putting on her cloak, filling a container with hot soup from dinner, grabbing a blanket. Lily, what are you doing? Claire asked. I don't know, something stupid, probably. She walked out into the cold night, across the muddy field, down to where Rowan had made his camp. He looked up when she approached, surprise and hope warring on his face. "Don't," Lillian said before he could speak. "Don't say anything. I'm not here to forgive you or come back. I'm here because letting you freeze to death would make me feel guilty, and I have enough to feel guilty about already." She handed him the soup and blanket. Rowan took them like they were treasures. "Thank you." "You need to leave, Rowan. This isn't healthy, for either of us." "I can't." "Why? What do you think this is accomplishing?" "Honestly, I don't know." He laughed, a broken sound. "I just know that riding away feels impossible. Like if I leave now, I'll never see you again, and I can't accept that." Lillian sat down on a log near his fire, not close to him, but not walking away either. "You really told my father off," she said. "He deserved it, for what he did to you. He'll make trouble for you, politically. Let him. I don't care. You should care. Alliances matter in your world. You matter more." He said it simply, like it was obvious. "I'm done sacrificing people for politics, done choosing duty over everything else." Marcus was right. I was becoming my father, and I hated my father. "Then why did you follow his example?" Rowan was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. "Because it was easier. Feeling nothing, caring about nothing. It's safe. You can't be hurt if you don't let yourself care. You can't live either. I know that now." He looked at her, and in the firelight, his eyes were haunted. "I know what it cost me. Cost us." Lillian pulled her cloak tighter against the cold. "My mother told me something before I married you. She said duty was everything, that happiness didn't matter, that I should be grateful for security and status and not ask for more." Was she happy? No, she was miserable. She still is. "And you don't want to be her?" "I'd rather die." Rowan nodded slowly. "My father used to say emotion was weakness, that a true leader felt nothing, showed nothing, just did what was necessary. He was the coldest man I've ever known. My mother withered under it. I watched her fade, exactly like you described in your letter, and I swore I'd never be like him. But you were." "I was." The admission seemed to hurt him. "I became exactly what I hated. And I didn't even realize it until I read your letter and saw myself through your eyes. Saw what I'd done to you." They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. "I can't forgive you," Lillian finally said. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." "I understand. But I don't want to hate you either. I'm tired of feeling so much anger." "What do you want?" Lillian thought about it. "Time, distance, space to figure out who I am without you, without any of it." "Can I write to you?" The question surprised her. "What?" "Can I write to you? Just letters. I won't ask you to respond. I won't ask you for anything. He struggled for words. "I want you to know me. The real me. Not the wall I showed you. And maybe, if you want, you could let me know you too. The real you, not the woman who was trying so hard to be what I needed." It was such a simple request, and somehow that made it more dangerous than if he'd begged her to come back. "I'll think about it," Lillian said. She stood to leave. Rowan stood too. "Lillian?" She turned. "I love you." The words hit like a thunderclap. "I know I don't deserve to say it," he continued, his voice rough. "I know I have no right to feel it after how I treated you, but it's true. I love you. And I'm sorry it took losing you to realize it." Lillian felt tears slip down her cheeks. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to love me now when it's convenient, when I'm gone. It's not convenient, it's torture. But it's true. And I needed you to know." She turned and ran back to the house, his words chasing her through the dark. The next morning, Rowan was gone. His camp was dismantled, his horse and supplies vanished. Lillian told herself she felt relieved. The hollow ache in her chest suggested otherwise. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Claire brought it to her, expression neutral. "Came by courier, from Thornmar." Lillian stared at the envelope, Rowan's handwriting neat and precise. "You don't have to read it," Elizabeth said, but Lillian's hands were already opening it. Lillian, I'm back at Thornmar. Not because I wanted to leave, but because you were right. My staying was selfish. It was about what I needed, not what you needed. I told you I loved you. I meant it. But I understand if you don't believe me. Words are cheap, and I've proven mine are worth even less. So I'm going to show you instead. I've started changing things here. The winter festival you wanted? It's happening this year. I've raised wages for every worker on the estate. I've started actually talking to people, learning their names, hearing their concerns. Marcus nearly fainted the first time I asked him about his daughter. I'm not doing this to impress you. I'm doing it because you were right about everything. I was cold, closed off. I treated people like functions instead of humans. And that kind of leadership isn't strength, it's cowardice. I don't know if any of this matters to you. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me or if you even want to. But I wanted you to know that you changed me. That knowing you, losing you, realizing what I'd destroyed, it broke something in me that needed to break. I'm trying to be better. Not for duty, not for politics, for myself. And for the hope, however small, that someday you might want to know this version of me. I won't write again unless you ask me to. But if you ever want to, I'll be here. Yours, if you'll have me, Rowan. Lillian read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in the drawer of her bedside table. She didn't write back, not yet. But she didn't throw it away either. And when another letter came 2 weeks later, longer this time, full of details about the changes he was making, asking nothing, just sharing, she read that one too. And the one after that. And the one after that. Spring turned to summer. Lillian grew stronger. The women of Ashford Commons became her family. She laughed more, smiled more, started to recognize the person she saw in her reflection. And every week, a letter came from Thornmar. Rowan never asked her to come back, never pressured, just wrote to her like they were friends getting to know each other for the first time. He told her about his childhood, the war, his father's cruelty. He described the estate, the people, the changes he was implementing. He asked questions. What was she reading? What did she think about the political situation in the South? What was her favorite season? Slowly, carefully, she started writing back. Short responses at first, then longer ones. She told him about life at Ashford Commons, about the women who'd saved her, about who she was becoming, and something strange happened. They started to know each other, not as Duke and Duchess, not as husband and wife bound by duty, as people. Then, one afternoon in late summer, a rider came. Not Rowan, one of his men, looking grim. Lady Blackridge, he said, your husband sent me. There's been an outbreak of fever in the villages near Thornmar. It's spreading fast. His Grace is helping coordinate the response, but he hesitated. He's fallen ill. He's asking for you. Lillian's blood went cold. How bad? Bad enough that he sent me to find you. He said he needed to see you in case he dies, Lillian finished. The man nodded miserably. Every instinct screamed at Lillian to protect herself, to stay here, stay safe, not risk getting hurt again. But the thought of Rowan dying alone, after everything— I need a horse, she said. Lily, no. Claire grabbed her arm. You don't owe him this. Maybe not, but I owe myself. I need to know. She didn't finish. Couldn't explain that despite everything, despite the hurt and anger and betrayal, the thought of him dying made her chest feel like it was caving in. Then I'm coming with you, Elizabeth said firmly. They rode through the night and arrived at Thornmar Hall as dawn broke. The estate was in chaos, servants running everywhere, the smell of smoke and sickness in the air. Marcus met them at the entrance, looking haggard. Thank the heavens you came, he said. He's upstairs. The fever's been high for 3 days. The physician says— His voice broke. It doesn't look good, my lady. Lillian took the stairs 2 at a time, Elizabeth right behind her. Rowan's chambers she'd never been allowed in during their marriage, were dark except for a single lamp. He lay in the bed, sheets soaked with sweat, his face flushed with fever. A physician stood nearby, shaking his head. I've done all I can. Now we wait. Lillian approached the bed slowly. Rowan's eyes were closed, his breathing ragged. Rowan? She whispered. His eyes flickered open, struggled to focus. When they did, something like relief flooded his face. "Lillian," he rasped. "You came." "Of course I came, you idiot!" A weak laugh that turned into a cough. Stubborn. Always so stubborn. She sat on the edge of the bed, took his burning hand in hers. "You have to fight this. You hear me? You don't get to write me letters for months and then die. Trying. Not sure I'm winning. Then try harder." He managed to smile. "Bossy. I like it." "Rowan," her voice broke. "Listen," he interrupted, using what seemed like the last of his strength. "If I don't make it, don't. If I don't make it," he continued stubbornly, "I need you to know. These months, getting to know you through letters, best thing I ever did. You're brilliant, strong, funny. Everything I was too blind to see before. Stop talking like you're dying. Might be. So I'm saying it now. I love you. The real you. Not the idea of you, not the Duchess, not the alliance. You. And I'm sorry I didn't figure that out when it mattered." Tears streamed down Lillian's face. "It matters now. It still matters." "Stay?" His grip on her hand weakened. Don't want to be alone." "I'm not going anywhere." His eyes closed. His breathing turned shallow. The physician stepped forward. "My lady, you should prepare yourself." "No," Lillian said fiercely. She turned back to Rowan, gripping his hand tighter. "Listen to me, Rowan Blackridge. You survived war. You survived your father. You survived becoming someone you hated and finding your way back. You don't get to give up now." She leaned close, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "I need you to fight, because I'm not done being angry at you. I'm not done figuring out if we can fix this. And I'm definitely not done getting to know the person you're becoming. So you fight, do you hear me? You fight." For a moment, nothing changed. His breathing stayed shallow, his skin burning. Then, so faintly she almost missed it, his fingers squeezed hers. And against all odds, he whispered, "Trying." The first night was hell. Rowan's fever spiked so high that Lillian thought he'd burn from the inside out. He thrashed in the bed, muttering incoherently about borders and battles and someone named Thomas who'd died in his arms during the war. His skin was fire under her hands as she pressed cool cloths to his forehead, his neck, anywhere she could reach. "More water," she called to Elizabeth, who'd stationed herself by the door like a sentinel. The physician hovered uselessly in the corner. "My lady, there's nothing more to be done. The fever will either break or it'll break," Lillian said flatly. "Get me willow bark tea, and those herbs the cook uses for inflammation. What are they called?" "Feverfew and elderflower, my lady, but then get them, now." The man scurried off. Elizabeth brought fresh water and watched as Lillian worked with methodical determination, changing claws, forcing tiny sips of liquid past Rowan's cracked lips, refusing to let him slip away. "You should rest," Elizabeth said quietly. "You've been at this for hours." "I'm fine." "Lily..." I said, "I'm fine." Lillian's voice cracked. She pressed her forehead against Rowan's burning hand, her shoulders shaking. "I can't lose him. Not like this. Not when we were just starting to..." She didn't finish. Couldn't finish. Elizabeth sat beside her, a solid presence. "Then we won't let you. But you can't do this alone. Let me help." They worked in shifts through that endless night. Lillian would tend to Rowan for hours. Then Elizabeth would force her to eat something, drink tea, close her eyes for just a moment. Then she'd be back at his bedside, watching his chest rise and fall, counting each breath like it might be the last. Marcus appeared at dawn with the herbs. "The physician said you asked for these." "Yes, help me make a poultice." "My lady, I'm not sure." "Neither am I. But sitting here doing nothing while he dies isn't an option." She met Marcus's eyes. "You've known him his whole life. What would his mother have done?" Something flickered across the old steward's face. Surprise, then a kind of sad recognition. "She grew herbs in a garden behind the east wing. His Grace had it torn out after she died, but she used to make remedies. For the household, for the villagers, she was good at it. Show me what's left." They found the garden, overgrown now, wild, but still there. And in the mess of weeds and neglect, Lillian recognized plants. Not all of them, but enough. Her mother had kept a medicinal garden too, before her father decided it was beneath them. This one, Lillian said, pointing. And that. Gather as much as you can. They brought the herbs back, and Lillian worked from half-remembered lessons and desperate instinct. Made a tea that smelled bitter and strong, mixed a paste that she spread on Rowan's chest to help him breathe, crushed leaves and added them to the water she used to cool his fever. The physician watched with poorly concealed skepticism. My lady, I really must protest. Then protest, Lillian said without looking up, but do it somewhere else. He left in a huff. Around midday, one of the village healers arrived, a woman named Meg with gray hair and knowing eyes. She took one look at what Lillian was doing and nodded approval. Good instincts, Meg said. You've got the right of it. But add this. She pulled a vial from her bag. Tincture of echinacea helps the body fight. Will it work? Maybe, maybe not, but it won't hurt, and doing nothing definitely won't help. Meg studied Lillian. You his wife? Yes. The one who left him? Yes. But you came back. He was dying. Meg smiled slightly. That's a start. Here, let me show you a few things. They worked together through the afternoon. Meg taught Lillian how to read the signs, the color of Rowan's skin, the pattern of his breathing, the way his pulse felt under her fingers. Taught her which herbs to use when, how to know if the fever was breaking or just shifting. You're a natural, Meg said. Ever considered healing work? Lillian almost laughed. I was raised to host parties and manage servants, not exactly the same skill set. Healing's not about skill, it's about giving a damn. Meg packed up her supplies. Most nobles don't. They call for physicians and wash their hands of it. But you're here, sleeves rolled up, fighting for him. That matters. After she left, Elizabeth brought food that Lillian barely touched. The sun set. The manor settled into evening quiet. And still Rowan burned. Around midnight, his fever spiked again, worse than before. He started convulsing, his body rigid, eyes rolling back. No! Lillian grabbed his shoulders, trying to hold him still. Rowan, stay with me! Elizabeth ran for help. Marcus appeared with 2 footmen. Together they held Rowan down as the seizure racked through him. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. He went completely limp. For one terrible moment, Lillian thought he was gone, that they'd lost him. Then she saw his chest move, shallow but steady, and his skin felt cooler. The fever, she breathed. It's breaking. Marcus pressed a hand to Rowan's forehead. You're right. The crisis has passed. Lillian slumped in her chair, shaking with relief and exhaustion. He's going to live. Because of you, my lady. No, because he's stubborn. She managed a weak smile. Runs in the family, apparently. Elizabeth pulled her away from the bed. Now you rest. I mean it, Lily. You're about to collapse. But if he wakes, I'll be here. I'll call you. But you need sleep or you'll be the next one in a sick bed. Lillian wanted to argue. Instead, she let Elizabeth lead her to a guest room, help her out of her sweat-soaked dress, and tuck her into bed like a child. She was asleep before her head hit the pillow. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows. She'd slept for 12 hours straight. Lillian scrambled out of bed, still in her shift, and ran barefoot down the hall to Rowan's chambers. He was awake, sitting up slightly, propped on pillows, looking pale and weak but alive. Marcus was beside him with a tray of broth. Elizabeth was changing the bedding. Both looked up when Lillian burst in. You're awake, she said stupidly. Rowan's eyes found hers. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Apparently, Marcus tells me you threatened the physician. He was useless, and took over my care with herbs and remedies you made yourself. Someone had to. Lillian. His voice was still rough but stronger than the night before. You saved my life. You would have done the same. Would I? He studied her. The old me. I'm not sure. But thank you for coming, for staying, for fighting when I couldn't. The words sat heavy in the air. Lillian became suddenly aware that she was standing in her husband's bedroom in nothing but her shift, her hair unbrushed, probably looking like something the cat dragged in. She gestured vaguely. Get dressed. Let you rest. Lillian, wait. She paused in the doorway. Will you stay? At Thornmar, I mean. Not forever. Not as my wife, if you don't want. Just stay while I recover, please. She should say no. Should protect herself. Should run back to Ashford Commons where things made sense. Instead, she heard herself say, I'll stay. For now. The relief on his face was almost painful to see. Over the next few days, Rowan grew stronger. The fever didn't return. Color came back to his face. He started eating solid food, sitting up for longer periods, even taking a few shaky steps around the room. And Lillian stayed. Not in his chambers. She took a room down the hall. But she visited daily, checking his progress, bringing books to read aloud, sitting in comfortable silence while he rested. They talked. Really talked. Not the stilted conversations of their marriage, but real discussions. He asked about her time at Ashford Commons, and actually listened to her answers. She asked about the changes he'd mentioned in his letters, and he described them in detail. The festival planning, the wage increases, the way he'd started learning people's names and stories. Marcus still doesn't believe it, Rowan said one afternoon, a week after the fever broke. Keeps waiting for me to revert back to the cold bastard I was. Will you? I hope not. I hated being that person. He shifted in bed, wincing. I see it so clearly now. How I used control as armor. If I didn't feel anything, I couldn't be hurt. But I also couldn't live. Not really. What changed? Losing you. Reading your letter over and over until I'd memorized every word. Realizing I'd destroyed the one good thing in my life because I was too much of a coward to let myself care. He met her eyes. I don't want to be that person anymore. People don't change overnight, Rowan. I know, but they can change. I have to believe that. Lillian pulled her shawl tighter. I want to believe it too. But I'm scared. Of what? Of hoping. Of letting myself trust you again and finding out it was all temporary. That the moment you're well, the moment life goes back to normal, you'll slip back into old patterns. I won't. You can't promise that. You're right. I can't. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. But I can promise I'll try. Every day. To be better. To see you. To value what we could have instead of hiding from it. His hand was warm in hers. Solid. Real. I'm still angry at you, she said quietly, for everything you put me through. You should be. I deserve your anger. And I don't trust you. Not yet. I'll earn it back, however long it takes. They sat like that, hands linked, until a knock at the door broke the moment. Marcus entered, looking worried. Your Grace, my lady, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Rowan asked. The fever's spreading. 3 more villages reported cases this morning. The local magistrate is asking for help coordinating the response, but with you still recovering. I'll handle it, Lillian said. Both men stared at her. My lady, Marcus began carefully, managing a disease outbreak requires organization, resources, someone who can make decisions quickly and get people to cooperate. Lillian stood. I managed an entire estate's household accounts. I spent 2 months learning how to run a farm with limited supplies and constant threats. I can do this. Lillian, Rowan started, you're still weak. You need to recover, and someone needs to help those villages before more people die. She looked at Marcus. Can you get me maps of the affected areas? Lists of available supplies? Names of the village leaders? Marcus glanced at Rowan, who nodded slowly. I'll have everything ready within the hour, Marcus said. After he left, Rowan studied her. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. These are your people, our people, and they're dying. Our people, he repeated softly. You said, our people. Lillian realized what she'd said, felt her cheeks heat. Figure of speech. Was it? She didn't answer, just headed for the door. Rest. I have work to do. The next few weeks were chaos. Lillian threw herself into managing the outbreak with the same fierce determination she'd applied to saving Rowan's life. She set up quarantine procedures, organized supply deliveries, coordinated with local healers, including Meg, who became her right hand. She visited the villages personally, much to everyone's horror. Marcus tried to stop her. The magistrate protested. Even Elizabeth, who'd stayed at Thornmar to help, thought she was being reckless. "You could get sick," Elizabeth warned. "So could anyone. These people need to see that someone cares enough to show up." And show up she did. Rolled up her sleeves and helped set up sick rooms, distributed food and medicine, sat with frightened families and listened to their fears. Worked alongside the healers, learning as she went. Word spread quickly. The Duchess of Thornmar, who everyone thought had abandoned her husband, had returned and was fighting for them. Actually fighting. Not sending orders from a safe distance, but standing in the thick of it. The whispers started changing. "She brought his grace back from death's door," one woman told another in the market square. Lillian overheard as she was inspecting medical supplies. "Aye, and now she's doing the same for our villages. When's the last time nobility got their hands dirty like that?" "Never, far as I can remember." One afternoon, Lillian was leaving a house where she'd just helped a young mother through a difficult recovery when she found a group of villagers waiting outside. "My lady," the eldest spoke up, "we wanted to thank you for everything you've been doing." "You don't need to thank me, You're just what? Nobility who actually gives a damn?" The woman smiled. "We heard you left his grace, heard you had good reason, but you came back when he needed you. And now you're helping us when you don't have to. That says something." Lillian felt her throat tighten. "I'm just trying to help." "You're doing more than that. You're giving us hope." Back at Thornmar that evening, Lillian found Rowan in the study. He'd finally been allowed out of bed, though he still tired easily. He was reviewing the outbreak report she'd been sending. 14 villages clear, he said as she entered. "Infection rate dropping. You've done incredible work." "We're not done yet." "No. But we're winning." He set down the papers. "Come here." She approached cautiously. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I heard what happened in the village today," he said. "The people thanking you. News travels fast. It does when the Duke's wife is out there saving lives and giving people hope." His expression turned serious. "I owe you an apology." "Another one." "For what now?" "For never letting you be this person when we were married. You tried to help with estate business, with the household, with everything, and I shut you down. Told you to focus on your role, as if being capable and brilliant and strong wasn't part of that role." "Rowan, I'm serious. Watching you these past weeks, seeing what you can do when someone actually trusts you and gets out of your way, it makes me sick thinking about how much I wasted. How much we could have accomplished together if I hadn't been so determined to keep you in a box." Lillian sank into the chair. "I didn't know I could do this. Before I left, before Ashford Commons, I didn't think I was capable of any of it. You were always capable. I just never gave you the chance to prove it. Maybe, or maybe I needed to leave, needed to learn who I was without you before I could be strong enough to stand beside you." They looked at each other across the desk. So much had changed. So much was still uncertain. "What happens now?" Rowan asked quietly. "When the outbreak's over and you've saved everyone and there's no more crisis to manage?" "I don't know." "Will you stay?" Lillian took a breath. "I need you to understand something. I can't go back to being that person, the silent wife who waited for scraps of your attention. If I stay, if we try this again, it has to be different." "How different?" "Partnership different. I want to be involved in the duchy, not just the household, the actual work, the decisions, the politics, everything. Done." "I'm serious, Rowan." "Yes. I won't be decorative. I won't be silent. I'll challenge you when I think you're wrong. I'll have opinions. I'll take up space." "Good." He leaned forward. "That's exactly what I want, what I need, a partner, an equal. Not someone who just nods and agrees with everything I say. And when we disagree, then we'll fight it out and figure it out together." Lillian wanted to believe him, but the scars of their marriage still ached. "I need time," she said finally, "to trust this, to trust you, to trust us. I'll give you all the time you need, and I might still leave. If this doesn't work, if you slip back, Then I'll have failed again, and I'll live with that. His voice turned fierce. But I'm going to fight like hell to make sure it does work. Because I love you, Lillian, not the idea of you, not the alliance you represent. You, the woman who threatened physicians and saved my life, who built a farm from nothing and fought off raiders, who's out there right now saving my people because it's the right thing to do. That's who I love. The words hung in the air between them. I don't know if I love you, Lillian said, and watched him flinch. I loved the idea of you once, the hope of what we could be. But that died somewhere between the silent dinners and the empty nights. What I feel now, it's complicated. There's anger and hurt and fear, but also something else, something growing. Hope? Maybe. Or maybe just curiosity, to see if you really can be the person you're trying to become. I'll take curiosity. A small smile. It's more than I deserve. 3 weeks later, the outbreak was declared over. The last villages were cleared. The quarantines lifted. Life slowly returned to normal. Lillian stood in the garden, the one that had been Rowan's mother's, that she'd spent the past weeks reviving. The herbs grew strong now, organized and tended. A living pharmacy for future emergencies. Beautiful work, a voice said behind her. She turned. Rowan stood at the garden gate, stronger now, though still thinner than before his illness. He'd been back to work for a week, but taking it slowly, actually delegating, actually trusting others to help. Your mother had good instincts, Lillian said. The plants she chose, they all have medicinal value. I didn't understand that when I tore it up. I just wanted to erase everything that reminded me of her, of caring about things. And now? Now I'm grateful you brought it back. He walked closer. I'm grateful you brought a lot of things back. Life, hope, the ability to feel something other than cold control. Lillian brushed dirt from her hands. She'd been working in the garden for hours, losing herself in the simple rhythm of planting and weeding. The magistrate came by this morning, wanted to officially thank me for my work during the outbreak. What did you say? That I was just doing what needed to be done. That any duchess would have... No, Rowan interrupted gently. Most wouldn't have. Most would have stayed safely away and let professionals handle it. You got your hands dirty, literally. He smiled at her soil-stained dress. You've never looked more beautiful. Lillian's breath caught. Rowan, I know, you need time. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. He paused. There's something else. The Winter Festival, we're moving forward with it. I want you to help plan it, and I'd like to invite the women from Ashford Commons, to thank them for taking care of you when I couldn't. The gesture took her completely by surprise. You want to invite them here? If you're comfortable with it, they're important to you. That makes them important to me. Lillian felt tears prick her eyes. They'll think you're trying to buy my affection. Am I? I don't know. Are you? No. I'm trying to show you I'm paying attention, that I see what matters to you, that I want to honor the life you built when you left me, not erase it. She studied him in the afternoon light, saw the exhaustion still lingering in his eyes from the illness, saw the uncertainty, saw him trying so hard to be different, and realized something had shifted in her chest. The anger was still there, the hurt, the fear. But underneath it, growing stronger every day, was something else. Affection, respect, the beginning of trust, maybe even, though she was terrified to name it, love, real love. Not the hopeful dream she'd carried into their marriage, but something grounded in who they actually were, flawed and scarred and trying. Invite them, she said. I think they'd like that. Rowan's face lit up with a smile that transformed him, made him look younger, less burdened. Thank you, he said. For what? For giving me a chance. For not giving up on the possibility of us. Lillian turned back to her garden. Don't make me regret it. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you don't. She didn't answer, just knelt back down in the dirt and kept planting. But she was smiling, and when Rowan settled onto the bench nearby, content to just watch her work, she didn't tell him to leave. That night, Lillian wrote a letter to Claire and the women at Ashford Commons, told them about the outbreak, the recovery, the changes at Thornmar, Invited them to the winter festival. She hesitated before signing off, then added one more line. I think I might stay. Not because I have to, but because I want to. She sealed the letter and sent it before she could second-guess herself. 2 weeks later, Claire's response arrived. We'll come to your festival. But Lily, make sure you're staying for the right reasons. Not because he's changed, but because you want this life. Because it's right for you. You learned your worth here. Don't forget it. Love always, Claire. Lillian folded the letter carefully and looked out her window at Thornmar's grounds. The estate that had felt like a prison now felt like possibility. She thought about the girl who'd arrived here 8 months ago, desperate to be seen. The woman who'd left, choosing survival over slow death. The person she'd become in the struggle. She wasn't that hopeful girl anymore. Wasn't the invisible Duchess. Wasn't even just Lillian from Ashford Commons. She was something new. Something forged in the fire of loss and rediscovery. Strong enough to walk away. Strong enough to come back. Strong enough to demand better and refuse to settle. And maybe, just maybe, strong enough to build something real with a man who was learning to be equally strong in a completely different way. She found Rowan in the study, working through correspondence. He looked up when she entered, a question in his eyes. I'm staying, Lillian said. Not in the East Wing. Not as your convenient wife, but here. As your partner. Your equal. With full say in how this duchy runs and this marriage works. Rowan stood slowly. Are you sure? No, but I'm choosing it anyway. She moved closer. I'm choosing you. Not the you from before. The you I see now. The you who's trying on one condition. Anything. You keep trying every day. You don't slip back into old patterns. You keep seeing me, keep valuing me, keep being the partner you promised to be. I will, I swear it. And if you don't, then you'll leave, and I'll deserve it. Lillian reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, gentle, careful, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. We're going to fight, she warned. Probably. And disagree about things. Definitely. And I'll challenge you and question you and refuse to make things easy. I'm counting on it. She smiled. Then let's try this. For real this time. Rowan pulled her closer, giving her every chance to step back. She didn't. Instead, she let him wrap his arms around her, let herself lean into the embrace. It wasn't perfect. There were still walls to break down, wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But standing there in the study where he'd once ignored her so completely, being held by a man who'd learned the hard way what it meant to truly see someone, it felt like a beginning, a real one this time. Based not on duty or hope or desperation, but on choice. On two broken people deciding to try to heal together instead of apart. I love you, Rowan whispered against her hair. Lillian closed her eyes. Ask me again in 6 months. I will. And 6 months after that. And 6 months after that. However long it takes. Good, she said. Because I'm not making this easy. I don't want easy. I want you. And for the first time since their wedding day, Lillian believed him. The 6 months that followed were the hardest and best of Lillian's life. Rowan kept his promise. Every single day, he showed up. Not perfectly. There were moments when old habits surfaced, when he'd start to close off or make decisions without consulting her. But the difference was that now he caught himself. Apologized. Tried again. And Lillian held her ground. When he slipped into his old commanding tone during a meeting with estate managers, she called him on it in front of everyone. When he tried to handle a dispute with neighboring landowners without including her, she walked into his study and demanded to be part of the conversation. They fought, often, loudly. But they also talked, laughed, started learning how to be married to each other instead of just occupying the same space. The winter festival came together beautifully. The women from Ashford Commons arrived 3 days early, and Lillian watched with quiet pride as Rowan welcomed them personally. He'd prepared rooms for them, arranged for their comfort, and genuinely thanked them for taking care of his wife when he'd failed to. Claire pulled Lillian aside that first evening. He's different than I expected. Different how? Less of an arrogant bastard. More of a man who knows he screwed up and is working to fix it. Claire studied her. You're different too. Stronger, but also softer. Like you're not fighting quite so hard just to exist. I'm not, Lillian smiled. I don't have to anymore. The festival itself was everything the manor had been missing. Music, dancing, food, laughter. The entire household participated, servants alongside nobility, everyone equal for one night. Rowan danced with Lillian in front of everyone, his hand at her waist, his eyes never leaving her face. Happy? He asked as they turned across the floor. Getting there, she said. Ask me again in 6 months. He laughed. You're going to make me wait the full year, aren't you? At least. But she was smiling, and when the dance ended, she didn't pull away from him, just stayed there in the circle of his arms, swaying slightly to the music, feeling something warm and solid settling into place in her chest. The women from Ashford Commons stayed for a week. Lillian showed them everything, the revived herb garden, the changes she'd implemented in the household, the work she was doing with the villages. They met the people who'd thanked her during the outbreak, saw the respect in their eyes when they looked at her. You've built something real here, Elizabeth said on their last night. Are you sure you don't want to come back with us? Part of Lillian wanted to say yes. Ashford Commons had saved her. Those women had shown her who she could be. But Thornmar was where she was becoming that person fully, where she was learning to be strong not in spite of her circumstances, but within them. I'm sure, Lillian said, but I want you to visit, all of you. This is still home too, just a different kind. Claire hugged her tightly. You did it, Lily. You found your way. We found it together. No, we showed you the path, but you walked it yourself, remember that. After they left, the manor felt quieter, but not empty, not like before. Lillian threw herself into the work of the duchy with Rowan's full support. She redesigned the distribution system for the villages, ensuring supplies reached everyone equitably. She established a network of healers across the territory, with Meg as the coordinator. She started a lending program for farmers who needed help with equipment or seed, and slowly, the people of Thornmar stopped seeing her as the duchess who'd left and came back. They started seeing her as their duchess. Period. The transformation showed most clearly one afternoon in early spring when Lillian was visiting one of the border villages to inspect a new grain storage facility she'd helped design. Lord Vance was there, Ence was cub. She hadn't seen her father since he'd thrown her out months ago. Hadn't expected to see him now. He had no business in Thornmar's territory. But there he stood, talking to the village elder, looking annoyed and impatient as usual. He spotted her, and his expression went carefully neutral. Lillian. Father. She kept her voice cool, professional. What brings you to our territory? Our? I see you've decided to play Duchess again. The insult bounced off her. She'd survived too much to be hurt by his petty barbs now. I'm not playing anything. I'm working. What do you need? I need to speak with the Duke about trade agreements, the ones your little tantrum put in jeopardy. My husband is occupied with duchy business. If you want to discuss trade, you can discuss it with me. I handle those negotiations now. Vance's eyebrows shot up. Since when? Since I proved I'm better at them than anyone else. She pulled out the ledger she'd been reviewing. Now, what specifically did you want to discuss? Because I have actual work to do. Her father stared at her like he'd never seen her before. You've changed. Yes, I have. This is ridiculous. I'm not negotiating with my own daughter. Then don't negotiate at all. Lillian closed the ledger. Thornmar doesn't need House Vance's alliance. We're doing fine without it. Better, actually. So if you want to rebuild that bridge, you'll do it properly. With respect. Or you can leave. You can't speak to me like that. I just did. She met his eyes steadily. You threw me out when I needed help. You prioritized your political standing over your own daughter. I don't owe you anything, but I'm willing to discuss business arrangements between our houses if you can manage to be civil. The village elder was watching with barely concealed delight. Probably half the village would hear about this by nightfall. Vance's face went red. Your husband will hear about this insolence. My husband already knows. He's the one who put me in charge of these negotiations. She smiled thinly. Feel free to complain to him about it. I'm sure he'll be very sympathetic." Her father left without another word. That night, Lillian told Rowan about the encounter. She'd expected him to be concerned. Her father could still cause political trouble. Instead, Rowan laughed. Actually laughed, a sound of pure delight. "I wish I'd been there to see his face." "You're not worried about the alliance?" "Lillian, we don't need his alliance. We never did. That was my father's paranoia talking. The idea that we had to have everyone's approval, everyone's support. We're strong enough on our own. And you just proved it by standing up to him. He might retaliate. Let him try. You're the woman who fought off an outbreak, who's revolutionizing how we manage resources, who has the respect of every village in the territory. Your father is a small man with delusions of importance. He can't touch you." The confidence in his voice made her chest warm. "When did you get so good at this?" "At what?" "Seeing me. Valuing what I do. Actually meaning it when you say you're proud of me." Rowan crossed the study and pulled her into his arms. "I'm learning. You're an excellent teacher." She let herself lean into him. The embrace still felt new. They were still careful with physical affection, both of them scarred by the coldness of their early marriage. But it was getting easier, more natural. "I think I'm falling in love with you," Lillian said against his chest. She felt him go still. "What?" His voice was rough. "Don't make me say it again. I only get one confession." "Lillian," he pulled back to look at her face. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm sure I want to try. Sure that when I imagine my future, you're in it. Sure that the idea of leaving makes my chest hurt." She touched his face gently. "Is that enough?" "It's everything." He kissed her forehead. "I know I said to ask in 6 months, but can I say it now?" "Say what?" "I love you. Not the idea of you, not the Duchess or the Alliance. You, the woman who threatens village elders and saves lives and fights me when I'm being an idiot. I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good," Lillian said. "Terror keeps you honest." He laughed and kissed her, really kissed her, like he'd been holding back for months and finally couldn't anymore. And Lillian kissed him back. It wasn't their first kiss. That had been at their wedding, perfunctory and meaningless. This was different. This was two people who'd found each other through pain and loss and the hard work of becoming better. This was real. Spring turned to summer. Lillian's work in the duchy expanded. She established a school for village children, started a program to train young women in healing and midwifery, worked with Rowan to reform some of the harsher laws his father had put in place. They became true partners, in the study, in the villages, in their marriage. When Rowan had to travel to the capital for political meetings, he brought Lillian with him. Introduced her not as an ornament, but as his advisor. Let her speak in negotiations, trusted her judgment, backed her plays. The court noticed, whispered, speculated. The Duke of Thornmar, once known for his cold efficiency, had changed, softened. Some saw it as weakness, until a border dispute with a neighboring duchy threatened to turn violent, and Lillian brokered a peace agreement so clever that both sides walked away satisfied. Then the whispers changed to respect. "She's not just decoration," one courtier told another. Lillian overheard while passing a parlor. "She's the real power behind Thornmar now." "Not behind," another voice corrected. "Beside. They're a team. That's why they're so effective." Lillian smiled and kept walking. One evening in late summer, she was working in the herb garden when she felt dizzy. She sat down quickly on the bench, waiting for it to pass. It didn't. Instead, her stomach rolled and she barely made it to the bushes before she was sick. Meg found her there 20 minutes later, pale and shaking. "How long?" the healer asked. "How long what?" "How long since your last monthly bleeding?" Lillian froze, counted back. 8 weeks, maybe 9, but I thought we haven't been. She stopped, because they had been. Not at first, but slowly, carefully, they'd rebuilt that part of their marriage too. Learned how to touch each other with actual feeling instead of duty. "You're pregnant," Meg said with certainty. "I'd bet my reputation on it." Lillian pressed a hand to her stomach. A baby. Rowan's baby. The heir he'd wanted when he married her. The thought should have thrilled her. Instead, she felt terrified. Because what if this changed everything? What if Rowan got what he needed and went back to being distant? What if all the progress they'd made was just him trying to secure his succession? "My lady?" Meg touched her shoulder. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," Lillian whispered. She didn't tell Rowan that night, or the next day, or the day after that. She wanted to be sure. Needed to be sure. Of the pregnancy, yes, but more importantly, of him, of them. A week later, the certainty was undeniable. Her body was changing, preparing, and she couldn't hide it anymore. She found Rowan in the study, reviewing crop reports. "I need to tell you something," she said. He looked up, immediately concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. At least I don't think so. She took a breath. "I'm pregnant." The papers fell from his hands. "You're sure?" "Yes." Rowan stood slowly, crossed to her. His expression was careful, controlled, and Lillian's heart sank. "Say something," she demanded. "I don't know what to say." "Are you happy? Angry? Indifferent? Because if this is just about securing your succession, if getting an heir was the only reason you tried to fix things between us—" "Stop!" He grabbed her hands. "Lillian, stop. Look at me." She did, and saw tears in his eyes. "I'm terrified," he said roughly. "I'm completely terrified. Because I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to do this without becoming my father. And the thought of failing you and this child the way I failed you before makes me sick." "Rowan, but I'm also happy. So happy I can barely breathe. Not because of succession or heirs or any of that political garbage. Because it's our child. Yours and mine. And maybe we can give them something we never had. Parents who actually love each other. A home that's warm instead of cold." Lillian felt her own tears fall. "You really mean that?" "Every word." He pulled her close. "I love you. I love the life we're building. And I'll love this baby. Not because it's my heir. Because it's ours." She let herself believe him. Let herself hope. The pregnancy was difficult. Lillian was sick for months, exhausted, uncomfortable. But Rowan was there through all of it. Held her hair when she was ill. Carried her when she was too tired to walk. Read to her at night when she couldn't sleep. And slowly, Lillian's fear transformed into something else. Excitement. Hope. The bone-deep certainty that this time things would be different. The baby came in early spring, after 14 hours of hard labor that had Rowan pacing the hallway like a caged animal. When Meg finally called him in, he found Lillian exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle. "A girl," Lillian said. "We have a daughter." Rowan sank down beside the bed, staring at the tiny face with something like wonder. "She's perfect. She's wrinkly and red and probably going to scream a lot. Still perfect." He touched the baby's tiny hand. Her fingers closed around his. "What should we name her?" They'd discussed this. Argued about it, actually. Rowan wanted to honor his mother. Lillian wanted something completely new. "Catherine," Lillian said, "after your mother, but we'll call her Cat. Something fierce and independent and hers." "Cat," Rowan tested it, smiled. "I love it." He leaned over and kissed Lillian gently. "Thank you. For this. For her. For everything. Thank me by being a good father. I'll try. Every day. That's all I ask." The months after Kat's birth were chaos. Beautiful, exhausting chaos. The baby cried constantly. No one slept. Lillian discovered that caring for an infant while managing a duchy was nearly impossible. But Rowan was there. Not just helping, but truly partnering. He changed diapers without complaint. Walked the halls at midnight singing off-key lullabies. Took Cat to meetings strapped to his chest while Lillian caught up on sleep. The image of the Duke of Thornmar, feared warrior and political force, wearing a screaming baby and trying to negotiate grain prices became legendary. "Your husband is strange," the grain merchant said to Lillian one day. "I know," Lillian replied. "I like him that way." Cat grew. Started smiling, then laughing, then crawling. The cold, empty manor transformed into something alive. Toys appeared in corners. Lillian's herb garden became a place where a toddler could dig in the dirt and learn plant names. And through it all, Lillian and Rowan kept building, kept trying, kept choosing each other every day. They still fought, still had moments of frustration and miscommunication, but they also apologized, worked through it, grew together instead of apart. One afternoon, when Kat was 2 years old, Lillian was in the garden teaching her daughter about lavender when Lord Vance's carriage appeared. She hadn't seen her father in over 2 years, not since the confrontation in the village. He climbed out stiffly, looked older, diminished somehow. "Lillian," he said. "Father, I heard you had a child." "Her name is Catherine. Kat. She's 2. Vance looked at the little girl, who was watching him with solemn eyes. "She has your mother's coloring." "Yes." Silence stretched awkwardly. "I came to apologize," Vance finally said, "for what I said when you left, for throwing you out, for all of it." Lillian waited. She'd learned patience. "I was wrong," he continued, the words clearly difficult. "You weren't being selfish. You were being brave. And I was too caught up in politics to see it." "What changed your mind?" "Your sisters. Emily got married last year, to the man she loved, against my wishes. She was willing to walk away from everything rather than make the same mistake you did. That made me think." He paused. "And then I heard about everything you've accomplished here, the reforms, the outbreak, the way you've transformed Thornmar. You're a better leader than I ever was." The admission must have cost him dearly. "Thank you for saying that," Lillian said carefully. "Can you forgive me?" She thought about the girl who'd needed her father's approval so desperately, about the woman she'd become, who'd learned that approval from others meant nothing if you didn't approve of yourself. "I can try," she said, "but it'll take time, and things can't go back to how they were." "I understand. If you want to know your granddaughter, you'll need to earn that. Being her grandfather isn't a right, it's a privilege." Vance nodded. "I'll earn it, however long it takes." Kat chose that moment to toddle over, holding out a flower. "Pretty?" Vance's expression softened. "Very pretty." "You pretty too. You my grandpa?" "I'd like to be, if that's all right." Kat considered this with a 2-year-old's gravity. Then she patted his knee. "Okay, you sit. I show you flowers." Watching her father get dragged into the garden by a determined toddler, Lillian felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. Rowan found her there later, sitting on the bench while Vance and Kat examined every plant in the garden. "Unexpected visitor," he observed. He apologized. "Do you believe him?" "I don't know yet, but I'm willing to give him a chance, like someone once gave me." Rowan sat beside her, taking her hand. "We've come a long way." "We have." "Are you happy?" Lillian looked at him, really looked. At the man who'd been her greatest disappointment and her greatest surprise, who'd had to lose everything to learn what really mattered, who showed up every day and tried, even when it was hard. "Yes," she said, "I'm happy." "Good, because I have something to tell you." "What?" "I love you, still, always." She smiled. "You tell me that every day." "I know, but you told me to ask in 6 months if you loved me. That was 3 years ago. You never answered." "I answered, just not out loud." "So say it now, out loud, for the record." Lillian leaned in and kissed him, soft and sure and full of everything they'd built together. "I love you, Rowan Blackridge, not because you're perfect, not because you've never failed, but because you keep trying, because you changed, because you showed me what real partnership looks like." "Was that so hard?" "Excruciating." He laughed and pulled her closer. In the garden, Kat's delighted shriek rang out. She'd found a butterfly. Vance was trying to explain what it was called while the toddler tried to catch it. This was her life now, messy and complicated and imperfect, full of second chances and hard conversations and the daily work of choosing love over resentment, nothing like the fairy tale she'd imagined on her wedding day. So much better. The years passed. Kat grew into a fierce, clever child who followed her mother through the villages and asked endless questions about everything. They had two more children, a son named Thomas after Rowan's friend from the war, and another daughter they called Joy because she was born laughing. Thornmar thrived. The reforms Lillian had implemented became models for other duchies. The healing network expanded, the schools grew, the people prospered. And through it all, Lillian and Rowan kept choosing each other. Not perfectly. There were arguments and setbacks and moments of doubt. Days when old patterns tried to resurface. Nights when the past whispered that maybe they were fooling themselves. But they kept showing up, kept trying, kept building something real from the ruins of what they'd destroyed. One evening, 15 years after that terrible winter when everything fell apart, Lillian stood in the garden watching the sunset paint the sky gold and crimson. Kat was 17 now, training with Meg to become a healer. Thomas was 12 and obsessed with horses. Joy was 8 and currently attempting to climb a tree she definitely shouldn't be climbing. Rowan came up behind her, sliding his arms around her waist. "Thinking?" he asked. "Remembering. The girl I was when I came here, so desperate to be loved that I made myself invisible trying to earn it." "You were never invisible. I was just blind." "We both were, in different ways." She leaned back against him. "I'm glad we learned to see." "Me too." They stood like that, watching their children play, the manor alive with laughter and light. This was what Lillian had fought for, not the title or the security or the perfect marriage she'd once imagined, but this, the messy, beautiful reality of two people who'd hurt each other and chosen to heal, who'd broken and put themselves back together into something stronger. "I have something for you," Rowan said. "Another surprise? You're getting sentimental in your old age." 37 is not old. He handed her a letter. "Read it." Lillian opened it curiously. It was a legal document, dense with formal language. But as she read, her breath caught. "Rowan, this is joint authority over the duchy, legally binding. You're not just my partner in practice anymore. You're my partner in law, equal authority, equal say, equal everything." "Why now?" "Because I should have done it years ago. Because you've earned it 1,000 times over. Because I want everyone to know that Thornmar isn't mine. It's ours." Lillian felt tears slip down her cheeks. "You ridiculous, wonderful man. I love you too." She turned in his arms and kissed him with 15 years of partnership and passion, and the kind of love that came from really knowing someone, from seeing their worst and choosing them anyway, from building something together that neither could have built alone. When they finally pulled apart, Joy was making exaggerated gagging sounds from her tree. "Gross! Parents kissing!" "You'll understand someday," Lillian called back. "Never. I'm never kissing anyone," Rowan laughed. Famous last words. As night fell and the family gathered for dinner, noisy and chaotic and perfect, Lillian looked around the table and felt completely, utterly content. This was her kingdom. Not the duchy, though she helped rule it. Not the title, though she wore it well. But this, her family, her partner, her life built from courage and choice, and the refusal to settle for less than she deserved. She'd left Thornmar a broken woman, convinced she was dying. She'd returned a fighter, strong enough to demand better. And she'd stayed as herself, fully, fiercely, unapologetically herself. The silent duchess who'd once faded in a cold manner was gone. In her place stood Lillian Blackridge, healer and reformer and mother and duchess and partner. A woman who'd learned that true strength wasn't silence or endurance or making yourself small. It was choosing yourself, over and over, until the right people learned to choose you back. And in the harsh world that had once tried to break her, she'd not only survived, she'd thrived. Years later, when Kat brought home her own partner, a brilliant young scholar who looked terrified of meeting the legendary Duke and Duchess of Thornmar, Lillian pulled her daughter aside. "Are you happy?" she asked. "So happy, Mama. He sees me, really sees me. We argue about everything, but he listens. He values my opinion. He makes me feel like I matter." Lillian smiled through tears. "Then he's worthy of you." "How did you know?" "With Papa." "How did you know it was real?" "I didn't. Not at first. We had to build it. piece by piece, through all the hardest moments. That's the secret, love. Real love isn't a feeling that strikes like lightning. It's a choice you make every day. To see each other, to try, to keep choosing partnership even when it's hard. Did you ever regret coming back? Never. Because I didn't just come back. I came back as someone new, someone stronger, and your father met me there. That made all the difference. Kat hugged her tightly. I want what you and Papa have. Then demand it. Don't settle for less. Don't make yourself small for anyone. Be fierce. Be honest. Be yourself. And if he's the right one, he'll love you more for it. I will, Mama. I promise. Watching Kat walk back to her nervous scholar, watching them talk and laugh and look at each other like they were the only people in the world, Lillian felt the circle complete. She'd survived a marriage that tried to kill her spirit, had walked away when staying meant dying inside, had learned her own strength in the wilderness, had chosen to try again, on her terms, as herself. And in doing so, she'd not only saved herself, she taught her daughter and her sons and everyone who knew her story that you didn't have to accept the hand you were dealt. You could fight for better. You could demand more. You could choose yourself, choose love, choose partnership, choose life. And sometimes, if you fought hard enough and stayed true enough and demanded what you deserved, you could have it all. Not the perfect fairy tale, something better, something real. That night, as Lillian lay in bed with Rowan's arms around her, listening to the manor settle into sleep, she thought about the letter she'd written so long ago. I will not die here pretending I am loved. She'd meant it, every word, and walking away had saved her. But coming back, on her terms, as her whole self, had given her something just as precious, a life worth living, a love worth fighting for, a partnership built on truth instead of illusion. What are you thinking? Rowan murmured sleepily. That I'm glad I left you. He chuckled. That's not what most wives say. And I'm glad I came back. That's better. I'm glad we broke, because it meant we could put ourselves back together the right way. Rowan's arms tightened around her. I'm glad too, even though it nearly killed me, even though I deserved to lose you. I'm glad we found our way back. We didn't find our way back. We built a new way forward. Poet. Shut up and sleep. I love you, Lillian. I love you too, you impossible man. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead. The land that had once been so harsh and cold slept peacefully. The duchy they'd built together, not through conquest or control, but through care and partnership, thrived. And in the manor that had once been a tomb, life bloomed. Two people who'd had to lose everything to find what really mattered. Two people who'd learned that strength came from vulnerability, that love came from choice, that partnership came from equals standing together instead of one kneeling before the other. Two people who'd survived the winter and built a spring that lasted forever. In the harsh world that had tried to break them both, they'd done the impossible. They'd healed, they'd grown, they'd loved, and they'd won, not against each other, together.